It feels to be back in the lands between, like slipping on an old pair of boots, the kind that are too thick and warm for summer and only ever see use by the first day of winter. And much like any old scrap of leather and fabric, I'll need my trusty stick to smash the spiders that seem to have made a new home among those dark corners. So, it's gonna be one of those runs, huh? Howdy, and welcome to DevBox. I'm Prakuza, and today I wanted to show off one of my favorite new weapons from Shadow the Erdtree. And what better way to do that than by challenging myself to use it in the worst way possible. See, what we have here is the Ancient Meteoric Ore Greatsword, aka the Mog, because Square Enix owns my soul. An old arrowhead that has been refashioned in the lost forges of the lands of Shadow to be a colossal greatsword. Not sure if I would like to meet the creature that considers this an arrowhead, but they seem to be long dead, so that's not going to be a problem for me. What is a problem is actually getting this weapon, especially with a level 1 wretch and without using any other weapons to make the progress needed to unlock it. Normally, you'd kill Radahn, not that Radahn, base game Radahn, then kill Mohg, not that Mohg, real Mohg, then take the Spirit Spring, not that Spirit Spring, the one below Castle Reprimand. And then head into the forge to the left of the dragon, and it's the reward for completing the mini-dungeon, which, funny enough, doesn't actually require any killing at all. Or, in our case here, instead of doing all of that murder and mayhem, we can simply ask a friend to drop one for us at the beginning of the game. Thanks, hun.
No problem. Love ya. Mwah.
Love you too, real person who recorded that line for me and definitely not my own voice pitch shifted to pretend I have a girlfriend. So, we've got our mug right off the bat, but is that really going to do me any good right away? I mean, this is a colossal greatsword after all, which naturally means that this thing is going to have some hefty strength requirements. And, not to be left out of the uniquely stat-hungry category of weapons, the Ancient Meteoric Ore Greatsword also requires a moderately high arcane stat in order to be fully useful. Nothing crazy, but it definitely makes me spread the build enough to make some later rune spending decisions kinda difficult. Still, that's not important for now. What is important is getting that strength up enough that we can at least two-hand the weapon, because otherwise, this is what we're looking at when it comes to damage. So, it's gonna be one of those runs, huh? Alright, first up, we need some free strength, as well as the ability to level up. Fortunately, we can get one of those by resting at the site of grace on the way to Stormvale, thanks to Melina. And she even gives us a quick way to ride around the world.
I offer you an accord.
I'm more of a civic man, but I wouldn't look a gift horse? Goat? Little guy. I wouldn't look a gift little guy in the mouth. Instead, we'll be taking Torrent all across the lands between. And I mean all across, because our first few items to get this build online are spread pretty far apart. Our first stop is going to be Fort Height, although we're not here to kill the knight yet. That'll come much later. Instead, we want the first half of the Dectus Medallion, and the path here has a fork we'll need to find Fort Feroth, which we can find by taking the teleport behind the Church of Marika in Limgrave, where we also picked up the Physic Flask, heading up to Gorank and then heading all the way down south to the fort. In here, we'll find the other half of the Dectus Medallion, which gives us access to the Altus Plateau when combined. We also find a consumable worth a staggering 7,500 runes, and Radagon Soar Seal, which will immediately give us +5 to all physical attributes at the cost of a 15% increase to damage taken. Considering that this 5 extra strength isn't enough to two-hand the greatsword yet, we don't even make it all the way to glass cannon levels. More like glass pea shooter. Well, that's fine, I suppose. After all, we've got the big dragon mama here. I mean, we don't have bleed or anything, but we can still cheese her, right? This is going to take some time. Hold, please. Nah, are you fucking kidding me? I might be rune starved for now, but we are not about to do this shit for the next 10 hours. Instead, we've still got some running around to do, like even further down the path beyond the sleeping dragon mama, to kill this scarab for a somber +8, and then drop down into this ring of chairs for a somber +9. These will be important soon, but aren't exactly critical right this moment. What is critical is picking up the Strength Knot tier, because mixing this into our physic means that we can have 3 full minutes of a +10 bonus to strength. This will become a regular fixture for us for almost the entire run, but for now, combined with the Sore Seal means that we have exactly enough strength to properly two-hand the Mog. And with that, I suppose it's time to give this thing a real stress test, as well as get to the limitations of this run. Because it wouldn't be much of a challenge if I simply used the weapon as intended, with its incredible stabbing R2, fantastic stagger potential, and split magic damage that offers me multiple ways to boost my damage. Instead, this is going to be one of those Ash of War only runs, not unlike the previous Blood only or Lawnmower runs. So, what's this mean for combat? Well, it means we can only use White Light Charge for every attack. Okay, so how's the test going? All said, pretty good. Halfway to killing recusant Henricus on the first try. After that non-damage I did to Tree Sentinel, I'll take something even resembling a fight as a complete win. Also, as long as I come back with more blue flasks, I get the kill and earn a talisman that I thought would be more relevant throughout the run. But I, in fact, never once equipped it. At the same time, I should mention that I've also been running around the world for other upgrades, like the 3 Sacred Tears and the Turtle Shield in Weeping Peninsula, and a whole bunch of golden seeds. There's a ton of these little things I'll be picking up, so for now, assume that I've scoured the map and have pretty much every flask upgrade you can get for the distance I've traveled, which soon includes Altus Plateau. However, now that we're able to hit the bare minimum to actually deal real damage, let's work on pumping up that damage. And by that I mean, let's go hunt down some somber smithing stones. We can get 1 from the mine behind the Aegil Lake, and kill the Stone Digger Troll while we're here. There's also a 2 from helping Blythe kill Daryl, and if you believe that this invalidates the run, take solace in the fact that I'll be selling the Bloodhound Fang immediately after the fight. Oh, was that more upsetting? Well, moving forward, I guess. Also, I would have bought an extra Somber 2 from EG anyway, since that's where I'm picking up the Somber 3, and a free 4 can be found on a body in this chair in the main lake area of Liurnia, north of EG. This all gets our Mog to +4, and we can actually jump it all the way up to +6 without any more boss fights. So let's take the long path to Volcano Manor. Why not take the Raya path? Well, I'm still rune starved, and that costs 1,000 of these bad boys, or requires me to kill the prawn seller, which I don't want to do. So we'll be walking across Altus and picking up the Winged Crystal tier on the way. This will let us actually start wearing some armor during boss fights, while all of our levels need to be funneled towards Strength and Arcane before I can start dumping anything into Vigor or Endurance. And that will be critical once I get into Volcano Manor. For one, because I'll be getting my Sombers 5 and 6, but also because I can get the chance to hunt down Istvan. It doesn't go perfectly well at first, but we eventually get that kill and snag some of the best armor in the game. With all of that prep done, we're finally ready to start fighting bosses and head on that any % path, which of course starts with the Siege of Stormveiling The Castle. So, Morgott, how's this go? Well, it's a +6 Somber weapon against the first major boss of the run, which is to say, he doesn't stand a chance. It gets close for sure, because my vigor is extremely low, but even without much in the way of health, the White Light Charge lets me more or less tank through most attacks and still get my own damage out. Also, Morgott, this fight is not. More on that note later. Now that we're past the front gate, killing off whatever big bads this castle has, let's get ready to fight our next boss already. It's honestly amazing how quickly Stormveil can be steamrolled. Another reason this is my favorite legacy dungeon in the game. While it can take hours to explore every nook and cranny, the major beats can be hit in like 10 minutes. Anyway, Godrick. This is going to be very telling for the rest of the run, because if this winds up causing me any amount of trouble, then that could mean even more moving forward. Well, as we can see from this extreme damage, I think it's safe to call the Mog, well, hold on. I need a better descriptor for this, something metaphorical. Like, the Mog is Capra curry. Let me explain. So we're going to start by washing our rice. Now, I'm not exactly an always wash your rice guy, but the extra starch here is going to make it kinda gummy. Great for risotto, but not for today's meal. So, run the rice under water until the water runs clear. This can take a while. Next, we've got some onions to chop, carrots to oblique, potatoes to dice, ginger to mince, and garlic to slice. That's the veggies taken care of, so now it's time to butcher the meat. Why? Because the only place that I could find that sold goat sold it in chunks, including a bunch of skin, bone, and connective tissue that I'm not going to want in the final dish. It'll be used to make a broth. Honestly, if I had any kind of foresight, I would have used the broth for the main dish, but I didn't pre-work the meat, so this is what we're stuck with. Anyway, oil up a pot and start bringing it to heat. Throw in the onions, then the carrots and potatoes, then the ginger and garlic to bloom for a minute, and finally the goat. Let this all saute for a moment. It's actually going to be steaming because this pot is mad overcrowded, but we aren't looking for browning here, so that's fine. Then add some broth. In this case, we're using chicken stock, but again, I'd suggest using the goat scraps to make a stock and then using that instead. Bring it up to a boil, but don't keep it there. Turn the heat down until we're at a simmer and let all of the ingredients cook gently together. Finally, once a paring knife can easily pierce the flesh of the carrots and the potatoes, we're adding our roux. I'm going the hold the roux in a ladle method, letting it mix together in a smaller container before incorporating into the larger pot a small amount at a time. Once that's all done, we can serve in a bowl or plate over rice. So, now we have a simple bowl of goat curry, made completely inauthentically by the by, since goat is a more common curry meat in either Indian or Jamaican cuisine, and this was a Japanese roux. Still, while it might be a mixed match of various regional specifics, it's a quality curry if you enjoy the funky flavors of goat as a meat already. And there we have it, a real-life representation of my feelings on the Mog. Or as the kids say, this thing is goated with the sauce. Yes, that entire detour was for a pun, and yes, curry is often considered a gravy or a sauce rather than a stew, primarily because it is served over rice. So, Godrick is dead. What next? Well, we can still get a little stronger, actually a lot stronger, by heading back to Volcano Manor and taking out Godskin Noble. There are several skips to get past this, but I'm very bad at all of them. And FromSoft apparently really doesn't like these, and keeps making them harder and harder to do. So Godskin Noble it is. This is a bit more difficult than Godrick was, especially since face tanking to do the white light charge isn't exactly going to be an option against an enemy as strong and fast as Noble. In that case, we get the first example of actual drawbacks of this run. The white light charge is goated as hell in terms of damage, and the hyper armor during the charge and secondary explosion makes it possible to muscle through whatever the boss is doing, but if my health and defenses aren't up to the task, then those opportunities aren't punishes, they're bait. And Noble loves to dangle out tons of bait. Still, thanks to some previous runs, I've gotten pretty comfortable with Noble, so I weed out the bait and smash the punishes. And lean on the heavy stagger potential of the Mog. Mind you, this stagger potential would be much better if I actually bothered to use jump attacks, running attacks, or R2 in any way, charged or uncharged. Still, the secondary blast of the Ash of War deals some heavy stagger damage, so staggers aren't entirely out of the question, even if riposts are. Alright, Noble is down, we can run through the rest of the manor, open the Imp Gate, and pick up the Somber 7 hiding deep in the location. This means we can get our Mog all the way to +9. And we still haven't even found a second Great Rune, by the way. On that note, actually, let's go pick up a second Great Rune. How about Radahn's? For reasons that should be obvious given this video's runtime. So, how does Mog work against Radahn? Okay, well, I didn't even press the button that time, so it's hard to call that a rebuke of the weapon. I mean, it's got great range with that charge and the explosion, right? So with this much power, how could I possibly get stomped by Radahn? Is it because I'm very bad at fighting Radahn? Yeah, it looks like it's because I'm very bad at fighting Radahn. Alright, time for a real run. Stop being greedy, monitor my range, and finally get a good win on the big guy. That only took like 20 minutes of attempts. Nothing terrible. What's next? Well, we've got a few threads to track down. For one, now that Alexander is here and we actually have the stats to wield the Mog, it's time to upgrade our damage by taking his shard. Sorry, Alex. I swear I'll do this the right way next time. We've also got Vare's questline that will eventually give us Mohg access, And we pick up the first half of the Erdtree medallion and go ahead and kill the nearby Omen Killer and Ensha back at the Round Table Hold for good measure. But with those threads quickly tied, we can head towards Leyndell Capital, starting with killing the Draconic Tree Sentinel. Not exactly settling the old rivalry we have with the other Tree Sentinel. In fact, I can feel a new rivalry brewing as this fucker punts me into the stratosphere for the third time in a row. Okay, we get some staggers, I missed the lightning dodge that I suck at avoiding, we chug some legally distinct Estus, and the damage of our +9 Mog does the work for us. This lets us head into Leyndell proper, where we kill an Erdtree avatar. Even with the white light charge, these things are nothing to be afraid of. In fact, we killed the putrid variant in Dragon Barrow for souls earlier. The Leyndell one's got nothing on him. Godfrey, on the other hand, he's also easy. Yeah, it's Godfrey without his strongest attacks or extra phase changes. And after the lawnmower run, even endgame Godfrey is almost free. But what about Morgott? Well, as long as I don't greed too hard. I said, as long as I don't greed too hard. Fine, greed. See what I fucking can. Oh, he's dead. I guess greed works. And with that, we have access to mountaintops, which I visit quickly for the remaining flask upgrades, but at this point, it's time for what folks were probably here for anyway. Time to head into the DLC. But first, Mohg. Well, his brother was little more than a roadblock. Surely the Lord of Blood will be a quick and easy
is mine and mine alone.
Oh. So it's gonna be one of those runs. Yeah, so to note, I do manage to pick up the Ancient Somberstone, which brings the Mog up to +10. But that damage increase is nowhere near enough to make Mohg a pushover. In fact, this is the hardest wall that I come across for the entire run. Like, this took me literal days. A haze of a weekend where I would grind out the fight for hours, go to bed, wake up 5 hours later, and jump back into the grind. It gets so bad that I take a major detour for a while to pick up some new gear in Erdtree. And I hate Erdtree. To be more accurate, I hate the final boss of Erdtree. But this whole place rubs me pretty wrong. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself here because first we need to head through Castle Sol, where this Guardian Lion is having a bit of a time, and then fight Nile, who goes down in 2. He goes down in 2. Not gonna lie, I didn't like this boss at first, but he's been growing on me in subsequent runs. I also pick up Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength at this point, but the FP costs make them not feel too useful, since I need all the FP I can get for White Light Charge. So I make a few attempts with them, but they aren't really part of my main build moving forward. Anyway, at the Erdtree proper, we quickly make it past the shitty branch part, through the much more interesting treehouses segment, and then fight the very fun and interesting true form Loretta. Want to know what hasn't gotten old at this point in the run, by the way? Dying to greed. I feel like Peter Weller in the opening scene of RoboCop right here. And she was so close. All I had to do was not greed, and this would have been free. The second attempt goes much better, and I keep my cool well enough to get the kill without taking too many hits. Honestly, at this point, my poise and the White Light Charge's hyper armor are doing most of the heavy lifting here. I really don't have to care much about getting hit outside of the fact that my health is relatively low. For endgame, I mean. Usually I don't come here before hitting 60 Vig, but I'm rolling around 40 right now. Not terrible, but I definitely have to at least be a little careful not to over-greed against bosses like Loretta. And this is as far as we're getting at this point. Why? Well, we only came here for the Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman, so there's no point in showing anything else here. Okay, I gave Millennia a try, but with an attack this slow, there's no way I'll even get to phase 2. You know what? I'm counting that as a complete win, even if I do die immediately after. Let's head back to Mohg. How's that going? Oh, right. Not fun. You really gotta know that I wasn't enjoying Mohg if I elected to go to Erdtree for fun. And to be honest, I really enjoyed the trip. This weapon is that good, against everything but this fucker. To be fair, most of the issue here is coming from my own execution. As I've been saying up until now, I've mostly been able to slam on the gas and let the white light charge run the show. Between the massive damage and the hyper armor, the only thing that really gives me an issue is if the boss is able to pummel me into the ground in the time between charging and healing. That's the case here with Mohg. To be honest, that was also the case with Millennia. Eventually, boss aggression is going to outmatch my own damage, either to their health or to their stagger. There are a few specific notes, however, that cause me extra grief outside of how greedy I'm being in the fight. Not design defects, mind you, but hard counters for this specific type of challenge. For one, Mohg's stagger resistance is a bit tricky, thanks to Nihil and the countdown to it. This is on top of the fact that if I do get a stagger from the initial charge, the follow-up explosion will pretty much always miss, because Mohg likes to fall out of range. As for the Nihil issue specifically, he doesn't seem to be able to be staggered out of unos, duos, tres, and he certainly can't be staggered out of Nihil. And for those of you who've either seen or performed the Nihil skip that assume I must be wrong on that, no, Nihil skip strats time the staggers around the countdowns and Nihil, knocking him down in the moments between these stagger-proof windows. Sometimes almost frame perfectly to knock him down right before the animation starts winding up, but once he's started Nihiling, the only thing that can stop him is killing him outright. And while the Mohg might have the damage to do this regularly, White Light Charge is a touch too slow to be viable for a fight like Mohg that requires such precise scripting. Then, back on the side of my own greed being the issue, Phase 2 is where most of my problems come in anyway. I'm being impatient and trying to maximize on every possible opportunity I've got, including a number of attacks that can be punished, but not with both parts of White Light Charge. The flying swipe comes specifically to mind, as it looks like a great opportunity, but it really isn't. So I eat his retaliation basically every time. Again, greed. Still, eventually I start to better recognize which attacks are viable, which aren't, and I wait a little more patiently for the opportunities as they really present themselves. So with a handful of white light charges and basically no heals left, Mohg eventually goes down like the rest, and we finally get what we've been going for this whole time. Access to the Shadowlands. That's right, we're heading into the DLC. So, Shadow of the Erdtree. I wonder what this is all about. I mean, a DLC that got nominated for Game of the Year? What's not to love? I mean, I definitely didn't write a whole video about not liking this a few months ago. Yeah, for those of you familiar with the channel, I'm not a fan of the DLC. But I got inspired to run through Shadow of the Erdtree with the Mohg the other day and found myself having a lot more fun. And I'd like to give basically all of the credit for me enjoying myself this time to the Souls creators I watch. Most influential of all was probably Bingo Brawlers, put on by Captain Domo. I'll leave a link to the Bingo Brawlers YouTube channel in the description below. Those matches from the last season were so intense and showcased what high-level play could look like so well that I had to give the DLC another try. My problems from my previous video still persist, by the way, and I still identify with all of the criticism I gave previously. But it doesn't stop me from enjoying the positives of Shadow of the Erdtree. Like, I still haven't drank the Kool-Aid on Elden Ring at all, or anything. But I'm definitely able to have a little more fun now than I did when the DLC first came out. Also, this map for Shadow Tree fragment locations really helps to shave off at least some of the worst effects of the difficulty. I'll link to the Reddit post where I found it in the description as well. A truly fantastic resource for anyone who found themselves bouncing off of Shadow of the Erdtree on release. Anyway, channel lore and shoutouts out of the way, let's get into the DLC proper. What's first on the docket? Well, it's the DLC, so naturally we're going to stress test the build against the first boss that I found last time, Black Jail Knight. Or is it Knight of the Solitary Jail now? Whatever his name, we're smashing his face up nice and quick. Yeah, this is basically how every NPC fight has gone and will go from this point on. As long as I do the White Light Charges explosion follow-up immediately, then NPCs can't break the knockdown loop. The only thing that stops me is running out of FP. To note, the damage here is also slightly buffed from being at Shadow level 2. But even if I was doing half the damage, I'd still never be in any real trouble here. For another example of the NPC pummeling, here's me earning the Jar Arsenal Talisman earlier. Normally, these guys give me quite the hard time, but here, they don't even touch me. Also, can you tell how little I focus on min-maxing my build during a run? Because I've still got the nihil counter tier in my physic flask. Fun stuff. So, if everything in the DLC is going to be this easy, then maybe this choice of weapon isn't too bad. Maybe Mohg's multi-day roadblock was a fluke. Well, to make sure we didn't run into another issue like that, I spend a decent amount of time roaming around gathering up Erdtree fragments, dumping runes into Vigor, and yeeting folks off every ledge I can. Have you seen anything more satisfying? We also kill some minor bosses, get fucked Idrid, and even pick up the Mog for real. Wouldn't it be sick to dual wield these for the rest of the run? Yeah, but no, gotta make it a challenge run or it doesn't get to be a video. Not that this run is really much of a challenge, beyond the opening where I didn't have the stats to wield it, and the Mohg fight. And that's about to be even more apparent when I pick up the two-handing talisman. Really wish there was a dual-wielding version of this, but hey, this is more helpful for this run. So what's to complain? Certainly not me. Not now that I've got some killer damage. Killer enough to easily kill one of the red bears on my first try. Ahem, I said first try. You know, you'd think that I'd have learned not to greed so much by now, and yet here I go, charging headfirst into certain doom. Okay, well, at least I got it on my first third try. Yeah, that's a thing. And as a reward, we get some fancy drip. Yes, I will be wearing this pelt for the rest of the game, but the fit isn't totally finished quite yet. I'll soon be replacing the Oathseeker armor I picked up, but we've got a couple of bosses to kill before we grab our Sunday best. First up is naturally the Divine Beast Dancing Lion. So, an all-new boss, not an NPC or a rework of base game enemies. How's the White Light Charge do against him? Well, the weapon does fine. In fact, it does some crazy damage. What doesn't do fine is me. Yeah, I'm very unfamiliar with this fight, and it really shows with these panic rolls. Still, the damage of that blast and its lingering hitbox make up for my lack of boss knowledge, and we get this after a few attempts. Once again, the lesson is to stop greeting, learn when to actually roll, and punish only when it's actually safe, as with any fight. Let's see if we've really learned anything about patience and timing by fighting R'hllana. No, still dying to greed. Yeah, I'm gonna be honest here, I probably shouldn't have even survived the attempt that actually got me across the finish line. Like, look at those panic rolls. And what the hell is that twin moon dodge? That roll should not have worked. I absolutely should have gotten clowned on the second hit and sent right back to square one. But I clutch a few solid jumps and greed like my life depends on it, because it does. And we come out against R'hllana with the shakiest of victories. Our next boss might be equally as animalistic as the lion, but it's nowhere near as difficult. This one I actually get in one. It's by the skin of my damn teeth, and my 60 vig, and the damage of the Mog is doing more work than my actual skill here. Still, Golden Hippo is nothing to scoff at. This could have easily gone south quickly if I hadn't already been learning that greed lesson at this point. Although with those bosses down, do you know what I do get to greed against? Rakshasa. Once again, the white light loop continues to work. In fact, for everyone who has been absolutely destroyed by this specific fight, I'm going to let the whole thing play out. Let the catharsis of watching her fail to start up that fucking woodcutter attack sink in. And maybe take notes to bring the Mog in next time you want to kill her. And killing Rakshasa is well worth it, since she rewards us with her armor, which also increases damage a small amount for each piece worn. Also, while it is supposed to increase the damage taken while worn, my physical defense is actually slightly higher with the Rakshasa armor on than it was with the Oathseeker gear. Not sure if that is a deficit of the Oathseeker stuff, or if testing my damage and armor on these slimes is giving inaccurate results compared to other bosses and enemies, or if this is a product of my Erdtree blessing already being above 10. Either way, this armor is a straight upgrade, on top of being the sickest look in the whole DLC. At this point, the next several hours involves a lot of back and forths through the DLC, setting up my Erdtree blessing up to 13, killing off some major Messmer knights, and grabbing Sights of Grace in front of a handful of bosses, like Messmer himself, the Erdtree avatar, and finally, Gaius. I got right lost on the way here, to be honest, to the point that I still couldn't confidently describe the way through the storeroom to get here. Still, after gathering up some extra runes, dumping some levels between Strength and Arcane, and exploring most of Ancient Rao early, it's time to get back to those bosses. In this case, we've got Gaius, mostly because he's blocking access to 5 whole Erdtree fragments. As for Gaius, I imagine y'all might be expecting several expletives against this dude, since the Boar Bro seems to have a rocky reputation online at best. And while this charge feels cheap as hell, I'm sure there's a consistent way to dodge it, but my execution on it is terrible. I don't really have that much problem with him. Aside from the charge, I imagine the attack that might be causing people the most trouble are the Phase 2 Gravity Ball and Dive Bomb, as well as this combo that he'll do in either phase. Well, my answer to the Gravity Ball is to retreat entirely. Like, stop fighting, stop looking for opportunities. The only thing that matters here is getting out of the explosive range. As for the Dive Bomb, dodge way earlier than you expect. Okay, not that early, but like you should be starting your roll before he's even started to drop. And finally, for that Wombo combo, there's nothing to really do about it besides learn it. My best advice is to dodge side to side. Every time I picked one side to dodge in a circle, he'd catch me. Back and forth, and don't stop until the final hit from the boar has come out. So, those struggling parts aside, we get through Gaius with little issue. A few deaths, sure, but he otherwise isn't much of a hurdle. And as a reward, we get to pump all the way up to Erdtree Blessing 15. It's honestly enough to make it through the rest of the DLC, but I've got the map, so I'll be going for 20 by the end. But before that, we've got more bosses to fight, like the Tree Sentinel duo guarding Marika's old home. Feels like there's some kind of loose end here I need to tie up. Yeah, like that. All frayed at the ends and shit. I'm sure it'll come up later. Well, anyway, it's more killing time. How about Ancient Dragon Man? First the invasion, then the man himself. That took 3 minutes, by the way, from the invasion to the actual fight. All was done with enough time for my physic to still be active across both encounters. Crazy stuff. Again, the White Light Charge is broken strong against NPCs. They can't do anything against it. For example, let's help Letta kill Hornsent. Why? To show off the NPC killing ability of the weapon, of course. I definitely didn't do it for a useless talisman that improves dash attacks, but it turns out that White Light Charge doesn't actually get the bonus, so I killed the guy who would have trivialized Messmer for nothing. I'd never make a blunder like that. And who am I kidding? I was never going to use him to fight Messmer. This was mostly to keep him out of the Letta fight at the end. Would still have been nice if the talisman worked, though. Anyway, where to next? I guess back to Jagged Peak Drake. Yeah, there is absolutely no sense of direction going on here. I'm mostly jumping back and forth looking for fun stuff to fight, which is why after this guy, we'll be skipping Senesax. Fun fights. Because, you know, that's what games are supposed to be. Fun. Anyway, the Drake goes down with little trouble, even if the availability of attacks means that I don't get a good stagger. Not that I can even make good on the riposte anyway. Well, with the Drake down, we can head through to the Finger Ruins. First, the Sniper Alley one, with the annoying leech dudes. And then, the second Sniper Alley one, with the annoying leech dudes. And then, we get to blow the third horn. Down in the basement under Ymir. Oh, and steamrolled Anna on the way in here. That's right, it's Meteor time. Or Meter? I don't really know how to pronounce it. This right here might be the strangest design FromSoft has ever made. A real thanks, I hate it type of design. Truly amazing and disturbing all at once. Right down to the wart-like eye that shoots lasers. As for the fight itself, well, honestly, I don't really have too much negative to say here. Like, the way that Meter moves is kind of funky. It feels like her walk cycle, tilting her body at an awkward angle, is meant to keep her weak spot from being front and center. And the laser attack in Phase 2 having almost no counter to fully avoid damage is pretty annoying. However, those are some minor ticks in an otherwise pretty well put together boss. Telegraphs are nicely timed between most attacks, her combos rarely get extremely out of hand, and her recovery time is open enough that even the white light charge has little trouble getting in a handful of punishes. Overall, she kills me a good few times, and the R2s would have often been way better than the Ash of War, but I'm still able to get the win with nothing but L2s. And now it's time to kill Yolan and Ymir. NPCs, need I go over exactly how undifficult this is? Is that a word? Spellcheck is saying it isn't a word. Well, I guess it's only fitting for the situation, since these two aren't exactly a fight. Although this does give me a bit of an opportunity. Hold, please. Okay, now we've got a +10 Yolan and Anna. Why? Put a pin in it. For now, we're taking a quick detour down into the Abyssal Woods, which starts with everyone's favorite backstab fodder, Jory. Although, I can't backstab. How's that going to go? Oh, pretty well. Yeah, the ability to close the distance with a white light charge actually means that I can break whatever distance Jory's teleport creates between us. I can also muscle my way through most of his spells and the backup he summons. That hyper armor is doing work. And before too long, Jory's dead. How about Midra? The rest of the Abyssal Woods are boring. Grabbed a couple Shadow Tree fragments, killed an NPC, ran from the Winter Lanterns. Okay, Midra time. And another NPC fight. Alright, nothing to really write home about here. Midra can also be flattened with the white light charge's explosion. Alright, moving on. Oh. There's more to the fight? Huh? Well, I guess there's nothing to do but rush forward and die. Repeatedly. Like a lot of deaths, actually. An aggravating number of deaths, in fact. Oh, come on! So yeah, gonna be honest here. Midra is easily the second hardest fight in this whole run, right after Mohg. In a lot of cases, I am overgreeding, trying to attack when I don't really have an opportunity, but this fight feels almost purpose-built to fuck with this build. While most other bosses will let me white light charge through or around some of the worst attacks, the building madness makes recklessly dashing around the arena a death sentence. Not only does madness deal a ton of damage when the effect procs, both to my health and my FP, but it also freezes me in place for what feels like a minute at a time. I think it's like 5 seconds, but that might as well be an insta-kill in the middle of a fight. The result is an encounter where I'm constantly trying to balance my aggression to make sure that I'm hitting Midra consistently enough to keep some stagger potential, but keeping from taking on unnecessary madness. If it was only a matter of eating hits and punishing, this wouldn't really be a problem, but it would also be like any other big guy with a big sword. So, while this is making this more difficult, at least it's unique. Especially considering how few bosses actually make use of madness anywhere else in Elden Ring. Anyway, while the fight itself is difficult, I'll work on building some muscle memory for walking around some of his attacks, make sure to punish right after the phase change, and keep close enough to not risk Midra using his more disastrous attacks like the laser or the multi-flame tendril attack thing. When it's all over, the Frenzied Flame is snuffed before it can burn the world to the ground. And we're done with the hardest boss in the entire DLC for this build. Put a pin in that, by the way. Okay, big boy Midra is done. Let's go for a somewhat easier fight. How about Putrescent? Will that joke ever get old? I sure hope not, because I love making it. But in all seriousness, this guy doesn't take me long to figure out. Also, the damage here is incredible. Like, truly insane. But the attack opportunities are shit. Prepare to hear that like 15 more times. Although I don't want to leave Putrescent on only that to say. I'd also like to point out that this is one of my favorite boss designs from the DLC. A close second to the next guy coming up. But I love this dude's gorilla body shape and the doofy horse, and the twisting spine-cracking movements he does with his weapon. Really, an incredible design and a pretty fun fight as long as it doesn't go on for too long. So with a weapon like Mog, perfect. The next boss, on the other hand, I don't care how long it takes. Hell, even the ascent to this dude kicks ass. Look at this. I'm jumping in the middle of two dragons beefing with each other, and little me with my squishy human body comes out on top. And we also get to speak to the main man himself, Egon, which leads us into the single greatest moment of this entire DLC.
Curse you, Bale! I hereby vow you will rue this day. Behold, a true Drake warrior, and I, Egon, your fears made flesh.
I could only ever hope for a hype man like Egon. Every single thing about this fight is fire, and Egon makes it so much better. As for Bale himself, he's a big dragon, the thickest and most badass of all big dragons. A 10 out of 10, and the main reason I even bothered to give Shadow the Erdtree a second try. So, how's the Mog deal with the best fight in all of Elden Ring? Well, the damage here is incredible, but the attack opportunities are shit. Still,
Solid of scale you might be, foul dragon, but I will riddle with holes your rotten hide. With a hail of harpoons! With every last drop of my being!
I struggle through about 3 attempts and get the kill. It's all downhill from here, until we get to the base game at least. Like with the Erdtree avatar. I mean, technically design-wise, it is a step down, but not a steep one. This is probably the most interesting wrinkle that this run applies to the DLC. Mostly because I can't get the riposte to chunk away health on the second and third phases. But also because his head is almost entirely unreachable with the white light charge. However, my damage is incredible, even if the opportunities are shit. In fact, the damage is so crazy that I don't even really need to focus on the head, so it takes a couple of attempts to get through this one, but once I get more comfortable with the dodges, the avatar goes down faster against the Mog than it did on my first ever run through the game. And back to the downward slide. With Messmer! Okay, again, a step down from Bale, although I do think this might be a step up from Erdtree avatar. Do I like Shadow the Erdtree now? No, couldn't be. Messmer might be goated, but he's an exception, not a rule. And for once, I have a harder time with this weapon than on my initial playthrough. Granted, in my initial playthrough of the game, Mimic Tear and Hornsent killed him for me. But that's neither here nor there. What is here is a lot of explodey fire attacks, and enough aggression that I can't use my back off and charge in tactic. And say it with me, folks, the damage is incredible, but the attack opportunities are shit. It's almost like that's the theme and the core reason I even bothered to call this a challenge run in the first place. So yeah, about an hour of attempts later, I locked in the timing on the dodges a bit better, got a decent stagger right after the and managed to avoid the snake long enough to put Messmer in the ground, right before doing the same to Romina. Huh? Was that oddly quick and kind of thrown in there haphazardly? Well, that's classic Romina for you. Okay, I'll talk about it for a second. This is one of the few fights that I would say is too easy, especially for being a remembrance boss, and also especially for being the penultimate boss fight of the DLC. She's unique, I like her design, I wish the butterfly incant you get from her was way more useful, and when all is said and done, her moveset is very easy to learn and not that interesting to execute. Kind of an opposite Gaius, whose moveset is abysmal to learn, but thrilling to execute. Oh, and damage great, opportunity shit. Sorry, almost missed the quota. Finally, to end off the DLC, we've got Enter Illen, complete with lion warriors, shitty spellcasters, as well as Lita and her companions, who are only 2 people. Yeah, I told Morn to be sad forever, helped Lita kill Hornsent, and never finished Freya's quest, which means it's only Lita and Dane with no backup. Too bad I brought my own. Ansbach, Tiolier, and the twins, Yolan and Anna. Does this invalidate the run? Sure, like Egon might have earlier, but not summoning Egon would have invalidated my fun, so we let that slide. And here, well, we've seen what the white light charge does to NPCs. Was my victory ever really in question? No. No, it wasn't. So we flex the power of friendship and move on. And you know what? It's time to double down on that power of friendship. Radahn Festival 2.0, baby. Let's fucking go. Okay, we'll fight him for real now. Wow, the damage is incredible when I'm not summoning. Too bad the attack opportunities are shit. Feel like I'm repeating myself, as if that is all this run has to offer. Well, I'll tell you one thing that this run has actually given me. Another opportunity to spend some quality time with Radahn Phase 1, and this part of the fight is actually pretty fun. At least now that he's been nerfed. There we go. Even the fight I hate the most has some positives. He's even got some decent Godfrey vibes. That is, until we get to his bastard version of Horaloo. Yeah, I've been a bit more positive on a lot of these fights than from my blind playthrough of the DLC, having had a much better time with most of these bosses. Like I mentioned before, I'm still not exactly ready to call Shadow of the Erdtree Game of the Year, but I definitely had more fun with this on a second run-through than I did on my first. All except for Radahn Phase 2. Fuck this guy. Fuck the flashing after effects, and fuck these arena-wide explosions. While I've started to actually enjoy Phase 1, I really do not find the second phase to be fun or interesting. It's so annoying, I don't even really want to bother getting to how I actually got through this fight. Although I will leave this one odd insight. With this build, Midra actually took longer to beat than Radahn. And Mohg was worse than both of them. Seriously, Radahn of all guys was only the 3rd hardest fight in this entire run. There's one that technically might be more demanding coming up, but if we're measuring this by the amount of time it took me to get through any of these bosses, Mohg is first place, with like 2 days of being hardwalled, followed by Midra for about 2.5 hours, and all the way in 3rd is Radahn at 2 hours flat. Crazy stuff. So let's end off this DLC by giving Radahn a taste of his own hyperspeed medicine. Alright, now that we're through the DLC with every one of its remembrances done, let's work on getting back through the base game. To start, I'll finish up Ronnie's quest by blasting through Raya Lucaria. Red Wolf basically goes down in one hit. Technically it's from the follow-up, so it wouldn't exactly be a one-shot since it's 2 button presses. Both of Renala's phases also melt extremely quickly. And since I don't need to use the follow-up for the children, there's no risk of running out of FP or blue flasks. And with that done, we can rush through Darkblithe, Estelle, and Adula. Estelle is the toughest of the 3, obviously, especially since the dash has trouble actually connecting with Estelle's head, which also means that the follow-up misses a lot. Still, this boss is nowhere near the wall he was on my first playthrough, and he goes down quick. Bajula, meanwhile, takes a lot of pokes to the legs, like any of the previous dragon fights. But hey, at least we get the Ranni questline finished and we'll be able to get my preferred ending. Also, since I went ahead and did all remembrances in the DLC, I wanted to test the waters a bit with the base game. There are 2 fights I dreaded at this point, so instead I decided to prep a completely unrelated one and fought Valiant Gargs. To be honest, coming here after the DLC means that I'm severely overleveled for this point in the game. So while I absolutely demolished these 2, that is definitely more on my insane levels than it is on the weapon itself or even my skill. I mean, I'm the epitome of skill issue, right? That was on the first try back from the DLC, by the way. Turns out, getting to the second phase last time wasn't a fluke, and I probably could have killed her then if I'd given it more time. But I was in the middle of my days-long battle with Mohg, and I simply couldn't commit to 2 brick walls at once. As for how I beat Malenia with this thing, well, the Mohg seems to actually be purpose-built to kill her. Like, it slots right in a perfect counter against her moveset. There are 2 keys here. The first is very obvious from watching the fight. That explosive follow-up launches her on her ass, which combined with the hyper armor we get when using it, removes most of her threat. However, it's another quirk of Malenia that most players might not really understand about her that actually takes the white light charge from good to amazing. Turns out, Malenia is much more reactive than many other bosses. Instead of closing the distance herself, she'll slowly walk towards the player most of the time, waiting for me to attempt the first strike so she can counter. The distance where she'll actually attack is a little tricky to figure out, but it is shorter than the range of the white light charge, which means that most of the time, all I need to do is charge in for an attack, dodge her counter attempt, then back away and wait for her to slowly walk into my range. This strat has 2 effects. One is that I'm able to be much more reactive and not getting caught off guard during my own greedy punishes. The second is that as long as I'm keeping myself at this distance, Malenia will never use Waterfowl Dance. I'm serious. Across this entire attempt, she never clicked the win button. Sure, I had to contend with the Phantom Summon, but that's never been a big problem for me. To survive, mind you, not to no-hit or whatever. I am not at that level against any boss. Anyway, that's the gist of getting through Malenia. Keep distance, knock her to the ground, and be prepared to dodge some phantoms. Otherwise, this is the easiest time I've ever had against Malenia. Better than Bloodhound Gang or corpse piling. Okay, with Malenia dead so easily, I decide to kill the big moose to celebrate. Why kill an elegant, majestic spawn of nature to celebrate besting the greatest warrior in the lands? Well, because... Anyway, that's the toughest part of my preferred ending finished. Next up is to run through Millicent's quest. Let's get through this real fast.
Buster O'Neill, Gold Needle run around, grab the prosthesis from Shaded Castle, return Millicent's arm, kill the ulcerated tree spirit, eat all Millicent's sisters into the abyss, pick up the Michelin Needle, and finally use it at the Millennium Bloom to get the thing to its final form.
Okay, now let's head down into the sewers. Get lost for a while, pick up the Mohg shackle, and fight Sewer Mohg with the... Wait. Shackle? What's this thing even do? Oh, neat. It stuns... Mohg. Wait. Fuck! Are you telling me I could have used this on the other Mohg this whole time and had an easier time getting into the DLC way back then? I'm gonna go cry for a while. Please enjoy Mohg dying while I'm gone. Okay, I'm back. Really needed to get that one out. I feel refreshed. So, what happened while I was gone?
Our journey together ends here.
What?
And remember,
Not again.
I will kill you. As sure as night follows day.
Back again. That'll definitely be the end for that, I swear. Oh, hey, now that I'm back, let me put my armor back on. Sorry you had to see Dude McStreamson like that while I was gone. Anyway, now that we've got the Frenzied Flame in us, we get to burn the Erdtree without having to let Melina sacrifice herself. And on top of that, once we get through Placidusax, we don't have to be confined to the Frenzy Flame ending. I call this the anti-bonk ending. But wait, we're getting ahead of ourselves. First, we need to get past the Godskin duo. However, will I get through these two without sleep pots or allies to summon? Oh, I guess like that. I mean, I could say whatever I wanted about how badass this weapon is, or that I've gotten better at the fight, or what have you. But the truth is, these guys, along with pretty much every other duo fight, have been nerfed so hard it might as well be a gauntlet fight against individual bosses, as opposed to actually having to balance the aggression and damage between two bosses at once. A little advice for anyone still struggling against these guys, though? Target Noble first. Apostle is much more passive. And now for the big man Placidusax himself. This goes well for a while, until of course Placy decides it's time to use his laser attack. Yeah, that thing destroys me every time. Like, it's an insta-kill if any part of the laser hits me. Either by outright killing me in a single bop, or by comboing me once I get flinched by taking the first hit. Either way, that means the second he starts up the lasers, I have to redo the terrible run back. I'd probably fight this guy more often if it wasn't for the 10 minutes it takes to retry him every time. Anyway, the key to this one is patience? I mean, that's kind of the vibe for everything in Elden Ring, but for Placy specifically, phase 1 is making sure to wait between the red lightning and make sure not to over-punish while he preps the fire breath. Oh, and also, be careful about getting stuck between his legs. This has never happened to me before, and I honestly didn't know that his collision could actually fuck me this hard. But hey, we reset, and reset, and reset, and eventually do fucking something that gets us past the lasers and nets me the win. Seriously, if anyone in the comments knows what I did here that was different, please tell me. I'd like to not be insta-killed by this in the future. This is probably another decent time to mention that I did not check Rakshasa's armor outside of the DLC, so I don't actually know what my damage negation is here with her armor on in the base game without the Shadow Tree blessings boosting my base armor. I'll admit that it is entirely possible that her armor is the reason this fight goes this bad, and I'd care more about it if any fight after this took me more than one attempt. But for now, we seal away the Frenzied Flame and go hunt down the last two Remembrance bosses that aren't on the required path. And you know what? In that case, I've got a present for you all. After smashing the gargoyles already, I've got a similarly cathartic encounter with Fia's champs. Yeah, let that wash over you. Bathe in the absolute domination of those annoying fucks. Alright, Fortisak's time. Now, I already gave away the goat a bit already, but yeah, he goes down in one attempt. There's not much difference between this dude and Lanciax or Senesax, but I didn't fight them in this run, so that doesn't really mean much, huh? Well, the fight is pretty straightforward, except for the fact that there is no way the white light charge is going to ever smack up this guy's face. So we're going for a longer dragon kill here. Aside from that, all I need to do is watch out and make sure the Death Blight doesn't build up enough to kill me. But that doesn't even come close. Never in question. Okay, it's time to sanity check the final optional remembrance boss of this run, and by the fact that I even bothered to show the others at this point instead of rushing this video through to the end, I assume you can all figure out how this goes. I make it to phase 2 on my first try. To be honest, I've never used a non-Serpent Hunter method to kill Rykard before. I tried back in the Lawnmower run, but that didn't exactly go well. The constant damage tick from the lava meant I couldn't get any attacks off against the boss. With the white light charge, however, the hyper armor means that I can make it to the follow-up explosion every time. So this is less of a fight and more of an endurance test. In fact, the only reason I die in my first attempt is because I run out of both types of flasks. But coming back for a second round with a few fireproof livers, a star shard, and America's blessing, I get the win with little trouble. The only real risky segment is the skulls in phase 2, which I do need to avoid while they're around. Although I'm not very familiar with keeping safe during this attack. Have I mentioned that it's been a while since I fought Rykard? Alright, with all of the remembrance bosses finished up, it's time to head through the remainder of the endgame. First up is Malekith. Actually, first up is the Draconic Tree Sentinel in front of him, but once he's dealt with, we've got Malekith. Once again, the white light charge does a lot of the work. For phase 1, I mostly get to walk out of Beast Clergyman's melee range, and then the hyper armor lets me disregard his ranged attacks if I need to. As for the furry friend in the base game's sickest armor, Malekith has a handful of very clean opportunities to punish, like after the overhead slam or the backflipping explosion. And with this much damage against a boss this squishy, it doesn't matter if the opportunities are shit, he goes down all the same, even if the last hit takes a hot minute to actually land. And we're in the endgame. Hey, remember that catharsis from Fia's Champs?
Marcus, high hopes of us will continue to struggle unto eternity.
Yeah, that's that good stuff. Have I mentioned yet how much I love this weapon? In fact, how about another example of exactly how beefy this boy is? Oh, Godfrey! It's been a while since you kicked my lawn mowing ass so hard it almost killed that video. Let's see how you like my Mog.
Tarnished, thy strength befits a crown.
You're goddamn right it does. Time to end this. Oi, America! Get down here and get ready to get your tits slapped. Wait, you're a man? Even better! I'm gonna blow my load all over your insides. Hello, Elden Beast. You really could have been the best set of final fights in FromSoft history, but you and Radahn had to be tied together. Whatever. This one doesn't put up much of a fight against the Ancient Meteoric or Great Sword, with or without the L2 limitation. Hell, I even managed to stagger through Elden Stars. Great job, Mog. So, how was the Ancient Meteoric or Greatsword? Fantastic. Was it much of a challenge run? No, but that wasn't really the point of this run, to be honest. In that case, what was it about? Was it an attempt to have fun and shout of the Erdtree? No, but that was definitely the effect of this. Was it to show off exactly how broken some of the new weapons can be? No, but yeah, it definitely did show off that in spades. Okay, then what was this about? Well, isn't it obvious? This was all a flimsy excuse to make that goat curry, and it was totally worth it. I'd never had curry before, and I think I've got a new favorite dish. At least a top fiver for sure. Hey, it's that time again. The end of the video where I invite folks to come check out the Patreon, link in the description, and make good on the rewards for those currently pledged. Patreon members get early access to videos and their names written in the credits at the end of videos. And those who pledge $5 or more get their names read out, like DevBox designers, Genghis Braun, and our DevBox developers, Azul. Thanks for your support, and thanks for watching. Oh, and I finally killed Tree Sentinel. Whew! Can't believe I almost forgot to tie up that loose end.